Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Eva Beylin. I'm going to talk a bit about the graph and then also leadership and entrepreneurship within the graph, as well as how it relates to my journey. So the graph is a default part of the Web3 stack. Basically, the way that dApps get data today when they want to build a front-end application is they query an API called a subgraph. The subgraph is a standard that was built by our team, I want to say around 7 years ago, that just makes it really easy to organize blockchain data when you're trying to retrieve it from the blockchain, because it's pretty complicated. You know, if you weren't using something like a subgraph, you might have to run your own indexer, you might have to run your own database, figure out how you want to standardize access to that data, and then how you want to then actually query it in your front end. And the graph makes it really easy with this standard API that you get to use GraphQL. And so we've been supporting dApps across DeFi, all verticals, including DeFi, art, DAOs, governance, all that fun stuff. So as I mentioned, we are really conducive with every use case, meaning if you're building a lending application in DeFi or maybe an art marketplace and NFTs, you can build a subgraph because a subgraph really is just a standard way to intercept information from smart contracts, meaning your smart contract might emit events or have other kinds of really interesting data, and then you want to surface that in your application. Maybe it's something like a balance or a username or historical data, and you can use a subgraph. So personally, the most exciting use case, in my opinion, is the NFTs and DAOs, which are a little bit lower volume. DeFi is definitely the more common use case, but with DAOs, what's really cool is there's a lot more sort of utility that comes out of DAOs and governance when you have really epic tooling. And it kind of goes, without saying that obviously in DeFi and all these things, you need great UX, but with governance specifically, it's actually very difficult. Anyone who's participated in a DAO here or in governance knows that it's very difficult to actually coordinate people. So making sure your app is, tip-top shape, is really important. So one of our top users is actually Snapshot. You might have heard of Snapshot, and they, work across protocols. So it's really important to them to have access to many subgraphs that basically support all the protocols that they're doing governance for. And we support 40 chains. So we're really here to support the entire Web3 ecosystem. We're chain agnostic, meaning we ourselves are deployed on Ethereum and Arbitrum, but any chain can be indexed. And that means any new chain, maybe it's something like a new Cosmos zone or a new L2, all of them can be supported. And then we have indexers that basically run the nodes for all these chains. So what's really cool about that is, we've got a lot of indexers that are actually quite philosophical, where they only want to run chains for specific ecosystems. And that's great, as long as they're running a graph node and they're indexing and doing that hard work, maybe we'll have, a bunch of indexers that are solely for the near ecosystem. And that's, they're obsessed with the near ecosystem. They're going to optimize their database for the near ecosystem. And then we might have other indexers that basically want to do, maybe more DeFi focus, meaning the demand for real-time data is a little bit more significant. They might have to have a more robust operation to query that data much faster. And so maybe they'll focus on that ecosystem. So to date, we have thousands of contributors in the Graph network. We've got over 10,000 delegators, and a delegator is just any user that wants to hold GRT and then stake it in the network. You earn fees for staking, and you're also contributing to the security of the protocol itself because you're enabling indexers to be able to do more work. So really exciting. Anybody, you don't have to be technical, can be part of the delegator crew. And then we've got, over 100 indexers, and these really are node operators. Their expertise is DevOps. They know how to not only run a node really efficiently, but also an indexing setup. And that might be bare metal, it might be using Amazon, whatever is sort of their preference. And we've got indexers all around the world. So really to sum up what the graph is providing is an all-in space for all your data needs. So we're open source, meaning that we are the standard because anybody can then also build on top of us, and anybody can fork subgraphs, build their new subgraph. We often see that because everything is open source, we have a lot of communities that actually collaborate with each other. So you'll see somebody build a Uniswap subgraph that wasn't even part of the Uniswap team. That subgraph then becomes the most used subgraph for any DeFi protocol that wants to use Uniswap data. So that's a really exciting way to enable more collaboration. The graph is also low cost, partially because it's a network, a marketplace that's a network. And that means that you get to choose what price you're interested in. So let's say you care more about price of your queries. You're a startup, you're really lean, you can't afford that much. Maybe you want a slower query time. There's indexers that will serve that slower query time. Let's say you're a bit larger, you have more demands with that high frequency trader type DeFi user. You might be willing to pay more for your queries, and also have an indexer that's more robust serve those queries. So they're charging a bit more. We also have geo rebalancing. So the cool thing about a network that's global means that you have a ton of node operators all around the world. We've got folks in Asia, Europe, all over the world, really. And that means that, if there are issues, for example, an indexer goes down, there's fallback indexing. So there's indexers either in your region or others that maybe are serving that subgraph that are ready at any moment, basically, to serve that data. And then really what we're excited about is that because you have so many indexers that are doing the work and competing, they get to compete for quality of service as well. So we have 99.99% uptime, partially because we always have indexers that are ready to serve those queries. So again, if any indexer goes down, you can be certain that there's at least another indexer that's willing to take your money, basically get your payment for the query they serve, and offer that better quality of service. And then lastly, there's no vendor lock-in, which is, one of the offerings of Web3 in general, which is, it's your choice, how you access, when you access the protocol. And really, if you, aren't happy with the network or the indexers, you can always opt out. Whereas in, Web2 SaaS, you really have to bite your way through the contract or negotiate your way out of it or, deal with all these other finicky things. And Web3 really removes that. So we've seen really significant query growth in terms of volume as well as development. And one thing that's cool about this is that we view our statistics as a bit of a proxy for Web3 development itself, because we often see spikes and peaks during certain activity points. So, the new market sort of started picking up steam in around November, December, and we also see that query volume really increase significantly in the last quarter. And similarly, more subgraph deployments. So, this is really exciting because it shows that even through some of the bear market and the builder market, people did keep building, and the subgraph deployment really remained consistent, if not increased. And so we're excited to see this grow and actually be able to tease out more analysis around Web3 behavior from this kind of data. So for example, last cycle, there were often times that we would see spikes in certain kinds of subgraphs, and then we could sort of infer, oh, wow, maybe there's like a major governance event going on. Why is snapshot query volume so much higher? Or, oh, there's a cool new Juicebox Constitution DAO event going on when we would see spikes in their subgraph. So, and all of this data is also on-chain and public. So if you're interested in looking into this and kind of coming up with your own analysis, you can do that. And just a bit more on the indexer statistics. So again, because there's a network of indexers, they're a marketplace, they're competing for service. Their service just continuously is improving because the market demands that. And so we are seeing indexers get a lot more engaged. Again, for maybe specific use cases, like let's say a DeFi use case, they really want to be, that core group of indexers that's specialized. Or they're just realizing, there's certain new verticals that they really want to dive into. So that might be a new chain ecosystem that they really want to support. And we often see overlap between, the node operators of those ecosystems, let's say like a Gnosis chain, and then those becoming indexers for Gnosis chain because, they're here to support their ecosystem. And that often means serving the data as well. Cool. So just going over some of the overall objectives of the graph, more in a roadmap perspective. So, we're expanding what it means to even have data on the graph. Up till now, we've only had subgraphs. Those have been excellent for, app development. But there's a whole other world of data services that we want to provide. And I'll get a bit more into that after this. Empowering developers is a big focus of ours. So, because we support all chains, we really view our role as a uniting role in the ecosystem where it really doesn't matter what chain you use. We want to empower you to build. We kind of trust that developers are making those decisions and those trade-offs based on sort of what they're seeing. And so we're here to support you on that journey. Optimizing indexer performance, definitely, a key focus. This is just making indexers more efficient, higher performance, and basically enabling the quality of service needs that dApps usually have of their indexers. Interconnected graph of data is an interesting one. This is sort of, alluding to how do we make the graph more than just a data source, but actually a knowledge source, or a way to organize more information. And especially with AI, we can do a lot more things, on the historical data and start to bring out trends and other analyses. And what does that infrastructure basically look like? And then lastly, protocol evolution and resiliency. This is really about, making the protocol itself more efficient. You could think about this as like a ETH2 Graph 2.0 protocol design that we're working on, which is just to make the economics a bit more efficient and improve the UX. So in terms of world of data services, we're viewing the world as really any use case, any type of user. So again, up until now, we served GraphQL, which is very app development focused, but we're excited to be launching SQL. So this is great for data scientists as well as any dApps that are building on the more analytics side. They prefer SQL versus GraphQL. We're also heavily exploring AI and what can the graph basically do to enable AI data services and what role does the graph play in those networks. So for example, indexers could run open source models like a llama and then feed certain kinds of information or serve queries based on what the user wants. One example that we're really looking into is if you could actually have code generation AI models. And so this is very specific to, an indexer running, let's say, a SQL code generation model, and then serving that SQL query to a SQL data service, and then that SQL data service serving a ChatGPT-like application. So we're looking into, is it possible to make it easier for dApps to basically integrate ChatGPT-like experiences on top of their own historical data using the graph network as that vehicle? And I think this is the last one on the graph, but basically we're exploring on the protocol side, basically making it more accessible for anybody to contribute and add new data services. So right now, for example, any new chain, any new subgraph, that can, be launched anytime. You just have to kind of pass a standard of quality. But for new data services, so things like new query languages, new markets entirely, we want to make it basically permissionless. So, if you've identified a new data need, that you can also launch that data source, host it yourself potentially, or be the infrastructure behind it, and then also initiate a new market where indexers are serving your new data service as well. I want to switch gears just a little bit into some of the ways that leadership has presented itself and entrepreneurship in the graph ecosystem. And I think we're a little unique because we are fairly decentralized as an ecosystem itself, not just our network. So one of the ways that we've sort of bootstrapped leadership and opportunities is through our Advocates program and our Advocates DAO. So we actually have 3 DAOs in our ecosystem. The Advocates DAO focuses exclusively on community members and community management. And the Advocates program is a way that anybody can basically align themselves with Web3, align themselves with the graph, and basically stand up in their community and start contributing. And by doing so, you get to learn, so you get really involved in the community. And then often we have people who started as advocates that become full-time contributors, in the graph itself, but also in Web3. So we've got a number of alumni that have become CEOs, joined other protocols like a live peer, pool together. We've hired many of them. So really, this is a great opportunity if you are interested in getting involved in the graph. Very focused on the community specifically. there's anything from helping with events, translations, evangelism, especially in local communities. We're really interested in getting more involved in sort of like the local people on the ground, not simply like the events and marketing, but like people like yourselves. And we have community managers and advocates all around the world. So really open to really anybody contributing. And then in terms of more practically, what are some of the ways that we've seen people rise up? So that could be anything from helping with the programming itself, helping with translations on websites and new products, actually assessing grants. So for a little bit, we've had our advocates actually support us as domain experts sometimes, especially in local communities, and then really seeing any way that they can help with BD, support, marketing, that kind of thing. I'll say one thing that isn't mentioned here is sort of the builder side. So if you are on the engineering side, we have a builders DAO as well, and they receive grants to build out new subgraphs and content around subgraphs and technical workshops, and also work directly with applications. So I would say Advocates DAO and Advocates Program is really our funnel for the newbie, someone who's really just trying to get their feet wet, in Web3 or the graph, maybe wants to contribute on the community business side. And Builders DAO is really where you can learn more about subgraphs and APIs, and also actually earn money for the work you do. And so here are the two DAOs and sort of what they do. And really we have the Builders DAO, like I said, focus on development. They also work directly with a lot of our projects. So some of them will, for example, need an improvement on their subgraph, or maybe they need a new subgraph altogether, or maybe we're looking for folks to give technical workshops at events like this. And so that would be a great opportunity to get involved there. And again, we've had several CEOs come out of these DAOs, meaning like they started off, they learned a bit more about the graph, maybe they even became a grantee for a little bit, and then eventually they kind of rose into whatever role made the most sense to them in Web3. The other area I want to talk about is our core developers. So Xiaowei talked a little bit about the decentralization of Ethereum core developers, and the graph was very much inspired by the way Ethereum grew, and really took that to its core from the get-go. So I think we only have, we have 8 here. Okay, I always forget how many teams we have, but we have 8 teams full-time dedicated across the globe. And they all work on very different things. So, for example, Edge and Node and myself, we were part of the original team that launched the graph, and then we split into the Graph Foundation and Edge and Node being more focused on development. And then since then, we've had all these other teams join us. Some of them, again, came out of our grants program. I want to say at least 1 or 2 of these were actually just independent contributors that rose up and really wanted to launch their own initiative within the graph. We were aligned with what they were doing in their roadmap, and so they received a grant to basically become a full-time team. Some of these were a little bit more external, where they had been working on something similar or adjacent to the graph, and we saw an opportunity for them to rise within our ecosystem. So really, I know the graph is very open, but I know other Web3 protocols are also very open to collaboration of sorts. And this is just, a few steps on how you can basically also become a leader in this space and what it would take. I would say the first step is really the most important, because that will set your direction, and that is aligning yourself to the right community and protocol that you're interested in. Especially right now, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in the market and in the ecosystem, a lot of shiny things, and shiny things are really distracting, but they might not be the thing that you are passionate about or want to keep working on a year from now. So I would say making sure you align yourself to what it is that you care about, and even if that takes months, it's really worth it. My personal journey is I was somewhat unemployed, working, between jobs and contracting by choice for about 6 months before I decided to join the graph full time. It was a very intentional decision for me, because I didn't want to just take the shiny thing, even though, it would have gotten me paid for, a few months. But I think that was the best decision. I've been with the graph for over 4 years now, which I never thought I would have been this long. But I think that really mattered to me and my reputation, what I cared about, what I have continued to work on. And you want to make sure that you're aligning yourself basically with something that you care about. Getting smart. So this could be anything from watching YouTube videos all day, like I did when I first started, to going to events like this, to reading a ton of articles, like really whatever that method is for you to learn, so you can get smart on the topic. And you really don't need to be technical. You don't need to be an engineer. You just need to take the time to learn yourself. And you'll kind of figure out what it is that you feel comfortable learning, right? Not everybody needs to read smart contract code, but reading a white paper, even if it's the first page, might tell you enough to fully understand, okay, this is what this protocol is doing. I understand now, I'm going to move on. And maybe watch a YouTube video later, maybe ask ChatGPT for some advice. Learning while doing, super important in Web3. I think DAOs are often the place that people try and pigeonhole folks to be that place of learning while doing, but there's a lot of opportunity in the form of grants. I know at the Graph and a lot of other protocols, grants can last anywhere between 1 month to a year, really depending on what you're doing. So it can be considered very much like a job, or even something you do while you're a college student. I know some of our grantees were actually college students. They might be doing something like part-time community management, and it's a great way to start because then when you do graduate, you feel really compelled to continue working in Web3 and you have that experience. Which specifically in Web3, because we are so small, having that experience is pretty important because it's quite hard to teach someone, from 0 to 1 to get, to start working at that job. But if you've done some of that work, it makes it a lot easier. And then I just want to end off with 2 stories, just to give you guys some inspiration. So one is about one of my colleagues, Tegan Klein. She was also part of the original team of the Graph with myself. Previously, she worked at Barclays and JP Morgan. She was an investment banker. She realized, what is the banking system doing? She defected, obviously, to Web3. She then joined a few different protocols, Orchid being one of them. They were a decentralized VPN and has been working with me at the Graph. And her journey is super interesting as she started as business lead of sort of the original team, and now she's CEO of Edge & Node, a 70-person development team, which is the largest development team in the Graph space. So it really goes to show, if you can work hard, there's so many opportunities for you to really take leadership. And then my journey, also pretty similar. I started in management consulting, also in finance, financial services, defected because I realized I didn't know what I was doing there. They weren't going to change. Worked in Ethereum at a few different startups. Omisego, worked a bit with the Ethereum Foundation. And then, like I said, I took an intentional sort of leave where I was very much I know I could get paid, but I don't want to unless it's something I really care about. And it's hard to find things you care about in crypto. That's something that you really want to stick around with for a number of years. And so I was part of the original team and then stood up the Graph Foundation and have been leading that for the last few years. So I'll end it here, but really just wanted to share that there's so many opportunities for women and men in Web3, and you have the ability to really drive your leadership journey. Thank you.